It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
On Giants.com.
I like it, I like it.
And the Giants mobile app.
Boom, give me some juice.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's roll.
Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. I'm John Schmeelk. Busy game preview and player interview show coming to you today. Later on in the show, Bob Papa will talk to the head coach of the Giants, Brian Daboll. Lance Medow previews the Arizona Cardinals with Howard Balzer. And to lead off the show, I had a chance to talk to Giants starting Mike linebacker Bobby Okereke. And now we're joined by Giants linebacker Bobby Okereke. Bobby, thanks for being with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. So let's briefly review how this week has gone before we look at Arizona. What were the film sessions like and what were the meetings like, trying to take some lessons out of that game against Dallas last week?
Yeah, obviously just very critical, hard conversations. We all got to play better. Got to bring better intensity, and, it's a performance business. We got to go out there and perform on Sunday. Our fans deserve better. Our organization deserves better, and that's what we're going to bring them.
How quickly do you flush that game out and just start looking to Arizona?
Pretty quickly. I mean, you take 24 hours, feel whatever, emotions, whatever you got to process, and then you got to move on to the next opponent because it's a week-to-week league. How'd
the guys come out in practice this week?
Good. Most guys healthy for the most part. We played with great intensity, great energy, and that's going to show on Sunday.
It was funny. It was a weird game for the defense on Sunday night, right? Like, you guys are 5 possessions into the game. You've only been on the field for one of them, yet you trail 16-0, and then the game flow gets all screwed up. So as you look back at the game as a defense, seeing how the game flow went, is it hard to take a lot out of it?
I think we just got to do whatever we can to create more energy and momentum for the team, whether that's creating turnovers or big hits. It's a team game. So, when defense isn't playing well, offense has got to pick us up. And when offense isn't playing well, defense has got to pick us up in special teams. So, we got to play complementary football.
I know one big goal this offseason was trying to improve the run defense. You weren't here last year, but I know they brought you in, A'Shawn Robinson, Nacho, all the guys. Pollard broke that one long one, otherwise not really a lot of big plays. How'd you think the unit did overall against the run?
Decent. We definitely have higher expectations for ourselves, and we'll see that on Sunday.
And it's kind of impossible to get your pass rush going in a game like that, right? Because the Cowboys never really under pressure to have to throw the ball. I think they had less than 5 straight dropbacks the entire game.
Yeah, they were getting the ball out quick too, during a little hurry up. But, we just got to make the adjustments and adapt.
No question. All right, now let's look ahead here. Talk about some of the players on your roster first. Micah McFadden, he earned that kind of starting spot in base defense next year. You're smiling. Yeah. What is it about Micah that you like it, and what did he do, you think, well this offseason to kind of earn that spot?
He's just a very smart player. He plays with great physicality. And he has great poise. His second year in the defense, and it really shows. He's playing fast. He's playing very quick, and he's just good football, really good football player.
How has Isaiah Simmons been fitting in that linebacker room?
Really well. His talent. There's really the sky's the limit for him. From a speed, physicality, mobility standpoint, he's a unique athlete. So just getting him, going in the system, getting more acclimated to it, I think he's going to be really special.
Wings talked about trying to kind of focus those athletic gifts to make sure you accomplish something with them on the field, right? So how is he kind of coming along, figuring out this defense and what Wink wants from him? Because I know from week to week, the position might be the same on the scorecard, right? But your role in the defense that week might be different, right?
Yeah, and he gives us, such more an opportunity because of his skill set to disguise certain things, put him in different positions, make it harder for the offense to really ID what we're doing. But yeah, in the scheme, he's just getting used to it. The angles we got to play with, the physicality we got to play with. So yeah, he's just getting better and better every week.
We talked when you got here, and you had the expectations of what it was going to be like playing in this defense under Wink. What's the reality been playing in this defense under Wink?
I love it. It allows me to play fast, physical, and free, and really just take the thinking out of the game. I just got to go out there and dominate, and that's what I'm going to do.
Where's the chemistry on this unit? Obviously, it grows throughout the year. You try to build as much in the summer as you can, but it's not real football yet, right? So where is this unit now in terms of your chemistry and growing together?
I think chemistry is very high, and I think that obviously terrible loss on Sunday was really good for us because going through adversity, whether it's week 8, week 14, we're going to face adversity again. So just telling guys, the adversity we go through and the lessons we go through in this game, we're going to fall back on that later in the road and be proud of what we were able to come out of it. So we're just gelling and getting closer every week.
I know it's a bit of a cliche, but is there truth to the fact that you really don't know what a group of guys is made of until you face some adversity like you did in week 1?
100%. It's not always going to be sunshine and roses. I mean, this is the NFL. They get paid too. So you're going to have tough games. You're going to have adversity you're going to have to face. That's life. But it's not what you do when you get knocked down until you get back up.
All right, let's talk about your opponent this week. I watched their first game. They do a lot of different stuff in the run game, right? They had one series in the third quarter where they bring the fullback in. They ran Wildcat. They rotate Connor and Ingram. They have Rondale Moore in the backfield for like a half dozen plays. What do you see from their running game that makes it challenging for opposing defenses?
Yeah, I think it's just very unique, and they have a variety of plays they can run, and they have players that have very good skill sets. James Conner is a very good running back. Josh Dobbs is an athletic quarterback. He can make throws, and he can also, be a factor in the run game. Like you said, number 4, Moore, he's a good athlete. So, they got good athletes over the field, and it'll be a unique challenge for us.
Did you face Connor when you were in the AFC?
We played Arizona 2021, but he didn't play that game, so I haven't played him yet.
How about when he was in Pittsburgh? No, you didn't get him?
No, I didn't get him.
When you watch him on tape, what makes him a good running back?
He's just very physical. He's downhill, and he has very good vision. I think he's a great pro, and I'm excited to match up against him.
When they have gadget guys like Rondale Moore and Marquise Brown who they use in the backfield, what kind of alarm bells and eyes do you have to use as a linebacker to make sure that you're looking in the right place and your feet are in the right place?
Yeah, you got to really have your eyes on your keys based off whatever position alignment you're in, because they're going to have different guys motioning, jetting all across, and they're trying to steal your eyes so they can come back and run a play here, a screen here, dump it off. So you really got to have great eye discipline and just do your individual job and trust your teammates going to do theirs.
You mentioned Dobbs. He's only been there a couple weeks, but he is familiar with the offense from a prior stop. Yeah. When you watch him in that first game, what you see?
I saw poise. He's getting the ball out quick. He's an athlete. Like you said, he was in Cleveland with Stefanski, getting comfortable in that system. So, I think he's a good football player, and we'll be prepared for him.
Stanford guy, Zach Ertz. Yeah. He led the team in targets last week. He was one of Dobbs' go-to guys. He's been doing this a long time, coming off an injury. You couldn't tell watching him in week 1, though. No shot. Your thought on Ertz and why he's been such a good tight end for so long?
He's just such a savvy, crafty, smart player. The way he's able to manipulate defenders with his body language, his eyes. He does a very good job running his routes. And, I think he's just going to be a great matchup for us.
All right, this is a long trip. We get to go out to Arizona. We hang out in Tempe for a while. Then we go back home for Bobby Okereke in San Francisco. Are you excited to be back out on the West Coast in that Pacific time zone?
Yeah, I'm excited. Play Arizona, play the Niners. It's going to be a great 2-week stretch for us. Just excited. I'll see the family out there and, hopefully, play great football and get them some wins.
I imagine since you were in Indianapolis and that's right damn smack in the middle of the country, you've probably never done one of these long trips before, right?
No, I haven't. This will be the first, so I'm excited.
Does what happened in Detroit a little bit, does that give you guys a little bit of an idea of kind of what it's like to be on a road trip for maybe an extended period of time when we did the scrimmages out there?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that it was important for us going through those joint practices in the game. Really just getting used to just adapting and adjusting. No matter the circumstance, you got to just go out there and play good football and be a pro.
All right, final question. You're one of the leaders on this team. Obviously, Giant fans, you guys heard it in the stadium on Sunday night. Not the happiest fan base in the world right now. If you were to give a message to Giant fans as to why they should still feel confident about you, this group, and this team, what would it be?
We're a great football team. First game, we're going to learn from it. And, we recognize, the fans, they deserve a lot better. The organization deserves a lot better. So we're going to bring great intensity and great energy to go, get them some wins.
Looking forward to seeing it on the field on Sunday, Bobby. Thank you.
Yeah, hell yeah. Appreciate it.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
That's Bobby Okereke. We thank you for joining us on the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giant fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Let's turn our attention to the Arizona Cardinals. Lance Medow had a chance to preview them with the great Howard Balzer.
The Giants look to regroup in the desert this Sunday as they visit the Cardinals in Arizona at State Farm Stadium for the first time since 2017. And to help break down what to expect from the Cardinals, we bring in a man who covers the team for PHNX. He's been covering the NFL for nearly 5 decades. You could also hear him on SiriusXM NFL Radio as the co-host of Hall of Fame Radio, none other than Howard Balzer. Howard, you got Lance Medow here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Everything's great, Lance. Great being with you and break down this, I don't know if it's fair to call it an interesting game, but I think we see a lot of games in the NFL maybe turn out to be a lot more intriguing when they're played than what we thought going in.
Absolutely, especially based on the results from week one. And that's where I want to start, Howard, because you look at this Cardinals defense, I think most people have to walk away pretty impressed in terms of how well they played against Washington, in terms of the 3 takeaways. They kept the Washington offense in check for the most part, and they got 6 sacks. Based on the level of expectation placed on the team overall entering the season, how impressed were you in terms of how the defense performed in that week one opener?
Very impressed. And a big part of it was because they have a relatively very inexperienced defensive line that doesn't have any household names. They had 6 edge rushers at outside linebacker that made the opening day roster. And so you wondered who was going to emerge from that group, because it's not like they have one guy that you're saying, oh, that guy can just get after it. And so when you look at that front 7, if you will, there were a lot of questions about it. After Sam Howell, they put pressure on him. The secondary covered pretty well. And I think you have to make the point that, Sam Howell was making his second start in the National Football League. But overall, that offense of the Commanders didn't do very much. They averaged only 3.8 yards per play. And I thought what the Cardinals defensive coaches did well was the rotation of those players in that front 7, keeping guys fresh, getting different guys in there. They had a bunch of different guys get those sacks. And so if they can continue it this week going against the Giants team, obviously, where Daniel Jones was sacked 7 times in that forgettable game on Sunday night against the Cowboys.
Absolutely. Well said. I think most Giants fans would characterize it the same way based on the result. Now, speaking of that statistic, Howard, that you brought up, the one thing that jumped out to me in the Dallas Giants game was the speed of the Cowboys and how relentless they were. And I think we got a little bit of a taste of that from the Cardinals. Why is this Cardinals defense so active, especially since, even though Jonathan Gannon was with Philadelphia last season, and we know he had the big bruisers up front and some really good players on the back end, there's not that same name and notoriety, but there seems to be a lot of athletes on that side of the ball.
There definitely are. And their formula, if you will, in the offseason was, in terms of new players that they were bringing in, was to get, a lot of guys on short contracts who are playing for their contracts, playing for their lives, but guys that they believe will play aggressive football. And they, Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis, the defensive coordinator, when you talk to them, they use the word violent all the time about the way they want their guys to play. And Kaiser White, who was signed a 2-year contract, who was with Gannon and Rallis in Philadelphia last year, kind of sets the tone for that defense, along with, of course, Budda Baker. And they just get out there and do it. And what's interesting in the terms of that violent thing, it led to issues on the second possession of the game for the Commanders when they had 2 penalties for forcible contact with the helmet. That was 30 yards, and a pass interference penalty. And that was, the Commanders scored a touchdown on that drive, 91 yards they moved down the field, and 67 of those yards came on penalties. But they cleaned it up pretty much after that and just played a lot smarter. But this is the tone that they want from that defense. And for week one, those guys played it to the hilt and got pretty good production from those outside linebackers. I mean, Dennis Gardeck, he only played 28 snaps in the game, but he had 2 sacks, and one of them forced a fumble, which was recovered for a touchdown. So that's what I think everyone expects to see that throughout the rest of the season. Again, the question will be what happens when they play really accomplished and very good offenses.
Well, and that's why, looking ahead to this matchup on Sunday, I think one of the other storylines that shouldn't be overlooked, Howard, is as I go back to reference Jonathan Gannon's past in Philadelphia, each of the last 2 seasons, he's gone up against the Giants because they're obviously in the same division. How much knowledge of the Giants do you think is beneficial, even though the Giants have made some personnel changes, but could that perhaps give the Cardinals a slight edge, even though they don't see the Giants necessarily every season?
It really could. And someone would take the flip and say, well, the Giants, know about, the Cardinals, but they're running a pretty different defense, because they came in and everyone was wondering, Lance, all offseason, what kind of defense are the Cardinals going to run? Because they had been a 3-4 team for several years. And that's where most of the personnel on this team was. I mentioned those 6 outside linebackers They're all, they're not guys that you would put down in a down defensive lineman if that's the way they wanted to play. So they in effect adjusted the way, what the scheme was to fit the players, that were there. So I think it does give, the Cardinals certainly some knowledge about the Giants and the way they hope to play on offense. There's no secret what they want to do. And I think, so many times, Lance, when you get a game like Sunday night, it gets out of hand early, and it certainly took the Giants out of how they wanted to play. Certainly when you're down 16-0 before you turn around, you're not going to be able to run the ball as much. I mentioned the 7 sacks from Daniel Jones. And so I don't know that the Cardinals are as athletic as the Cowboys team on defense, but they get after it. They get after it. And the Giants have some questions on the offensive line. Andrew Thomas, I know, is banged up at left tackle. So they will try to capitalize on that. And so while I think that familiarity can help, it still comes down to players going out in the field and executing and doing, what they're supposed to do on every play. And we'll see if they can, follow up last week with their first home game. Obviously, it's their home opener. This is a team, and it's a different team. I get it, but even or not, this is a crazy stat, Lance. The last time the Cardinals won a home game on a Sunday was on October 24th, 2021. Wow. It's been almost 2 years when they beat the Texans to go to 7-0 in that 2021 season. Since then, overall, they are 1-12 at home since that game against the Texans. And so a lot of different players, obviously, that are on this team now. But that the players who are back, like the Buda Bakers and guys like that, are very mindful of what's happened. A lot of those games were close games. I mean, heck, 8 of the 12 were one-score games. That's what separates teams in the NFL, are those one-score games. I mean, heck, we saw, the Giants last year, 9-7-1 gets Brian Daboll Coach of the Year. They were 8-4 in one-score games. The Cardinals were 2-6 in one-score games, and that cost Cliff Kingsbury his job.
And I'll bring, even though it's off topic, the Minnesota Vikings into the equation. Yeah. They were 11-0, right, in one-score games last season, and already lost in week 1 this past year in a one-score game. So you're right. You walk that fine line, and that's the difference between making the playoffs or having a winning versus a losing record. And I think you brought up a great point, Howard, about the game flow in the Cowboys-Giants game. And that's why I want to bring the Cardinals offense into this equation, because you look at the numbers, they don't jump off the page. Josh Dobbs had an average pass per attempt of just 4.4 yards. So clearly they weren't looking for the home runs. How much was that a product in your mind of Washington's defense versus the Cardinals just saying, hey, Dobbs has been here for 2 weeks. We're going to keep it conservative, and we're not going to attempt to press the envelope right out of the gates?
I think it's a little bit of both, certainly. And certainly the Commanders' defensive front was a big part of it. And Dobbs, talked this week about how it's like night and day how I feel in this offense from last Wednesday to yesterday and the first practice of the week, and getting comfortable with his receivers. Yeah, all anybody talked about, Lance, on Dobbs in those 2 weeks, how smart he is and how this and that, he has familiarity with the system. Well, he didn't know his receivers. Some of them he didn't even know their names. And he made the point yesterday. This was the first in the game. This was the first time that I'm throwing to these guys and throwing to them in their routes in a true full speed situation. So I think all that came into it. And here's the thing that always kind of, I think what's forgotten many times is offensive coordinators devise game plans based on what they have and going against the other team. So naturally, for a few days here, we hear, well, they should have taken more shots downfield. They should have thrown it downfield. Well, first of all, if you don't have that timing with your receivers, number one. And number two, if you're wondering about the protection against that defensive line. And I know the weather wasn't good Sunday night, but in the afternoon, especially in the second half against, for the Cardinals against Washington, and you're just not going to take those shots. Maybe late in the game you will, because you're trying to come from behind, but they were never truly coming from far, far behind. And as any quarterback will tell you, you got to be smart with the football. Yeah, you can start, on the field, but before you know it, you're down 21-0, and then you're out of the football game. So But I think, like I said, I think it was a combination. I don't know how many more shots, we'll see this week. I know the Giants are a pretty good front. They're not as good as the Commanders, probably. So we'll see if they're able to establish the running game a little bit more and do better on first down. I charted this. This is pretty incredible. The Cardinals had 14 negative yardage plays during the game, and a bunch of them were on first down, which led to 10 missed opportunities on third down that were 10 yards or more, and an average a little over 12. So you have to avoid that in the NFL if you're going to be successful, move the chains, and get some continuity in your offense. And so everyone's going to be interested to see how this works in week 2 for Joshua Dobbs and the rest of that offense.
Yeah, especially since you become more predictable if you're constantly facing third and longs. The defense clearly knows that you're going to be throwing in those situations. From what I gathered against Washington, it seemed as if, even though, to your point, they weren't taking chances down the field, and rightfully so based on the limited time of the personnel, they were trying to get some of their elusive weapons out in open space, screens, reverses. A guy like Rondell Moore comes to mind, James Conner out of the backfield. How much do you think, Howard, that's going to be the true identity of this offense, at least before Joshua Dobbs gets a little bit more comfortable with his targets, as you mentioned?
I think it will be a big point. Who knows? By the time he really gets comfortable, everyone's hoping it'll be time for Kyler Murray to return. But that's another whole story we could talk about for a long time. But, early in the game, they tried some screens, and you can see that the timing just wasn't there. They just weren't, they weren't very efficient on it. They did have one in the second half to James Conner that went for 11 yards and was much better than some of the earlier ones. But those are all the things that come with time on task in practice, but also come with running it in a game. And there just hadn't been any of that. I mean, this guy, Dobbs had 5 practices with the team after he was acquired, and 2 of them were just hour practice. And it's not as if it's only the number one offense on the field when you're in practice. It's basically only half of it. And so there you would think there has to be some improvement. How much, we'll see. But I think, like you said, those quick things and all that, they do have Hollywood who can get deep. But even Dobbs pointed out that the Commanders started going too high on defense in the second quarter and going forward. And when that's the case, you're just not going to take too many chances. You just have to play smart football, as I mentioned earlier.
Talking with Howard Balzer, he covers the Cardinals for PHNX. You could also hear him on Sirius XM NFL Radio as we set the stage for the Cardinals and the Giants in the desert this Sunday. In terms of how they may go about attacking the Giants, especially since the Giants obviously had major issues on both sides of the ball, do they look at the offensive line, Howard, you think, and they say, well, let's see if the Giants learn their lesson and we're going to try to pressure and try to be creative as much as possible? Or because the Cowboys have Micah Parsons and company and they don't, you can only take so much, I guess, is what I'm getting at from that matchup.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And they, as I mentioned earlier, they don't have a Micah Parsons on that defense. Although, some would say, Budda Baker certainly is an accomplished player, but he's certainly different in what he does on the field, Micah Parsons. And so they're going to continue doing, for the most part, doing what they've been doing. The key will be shutting down the run. As I mentioned, I mean, the interesting thing with that game Sunday night, as I was looking at it, is the Giants moved right down the field on the first possession.
Yeah.
That's forgotten in a blowout, and got to the 8-yard line. Then they had a false start and then a fumble and pushed them back all the way to 27 and get a field goal block and return for a touchdown. And so when it gets out of hand early for an offense, no matter who you are, you're going to get out of the way that works for you and what you want to do. And that's obviously establishing Saquon Barkley, and as talented as he is, and a tremendous part of how the Giants were able to do what they did last season. So that the Cardinals' focus is being able to limit Saquon Barkley, and it'll in this game against Washington, there were a lot of people who were surprised that the Commanders didn't run it more. The Cardinals defense is 9th in the NFL on first down plays. They only allowed about 3.4 yards on average for first down play. they can do that in this game, then they'll have a chance of means you're slowing down Saquon Barkley. If they can't do that, then I think they will still have, a certain amount of issues.
And they also need to account for Daniel Jones's mobility. Sam Howell just ran twice. He did have the rushing score off a scramble, but Jones is a big part, obviously, of the Giants' run game, too. So I think that's another interesting component. You brought up how things really started to unravel for the Giants late on that first drive. And I'm not saying it's identical, Howard, but you look at the Cardinals game, well, they're very much in the thick of things. Unfortunately, then Dobbs fumbles the ball twice late, and that sets up Washington. Let's face it, they're at the Arizona 30-yard line, essentially, on both of those drives. No surprise they scored. And then the 9 penalties for over 120 yards. I guess what I'm getting at is, how much do you think Arizona looks at it as, okay, hey, we have areas to improve. There's no doubt about it. We have to score more points. But if we didn't have some of those mental lapses and turnovers, they could be walking away with a win over Washington last week very easily here.
Totally. And no doubt about it. And you talk about a drive bogging down. The Cardinals had one at the start of the second half when they moved right down the field after struggling in the first half and got inside the red zone, and then weren't able to do anything on 3 downs and ended up kicking a field goal to score their final points of the game. In 5 possessions after that, and 2 of them were those fumbles by Joshua Dobbs, in 5 possessions, they ran 23 plays for a total of 35 yards. And 2 3-and-outs, actually, I always put the word totaled in quotes. In two of those 3-and-outs, they had a total of minus yardage in the possession. And so they had their opportunities with the ball, and like you said, turned it over. And you can't really blame Dobbs on the sack fumble, because that was just a missed block, and Sweat came around the end and hit him from behind as he was throwing and lost the football. Most any quarterback is going to do that. The center exchange, he didn't make an excuse, but he said it was a wet ball, and he said instead of picking it up, I probably should have just fallen on it. But again, that leads, to points for the Commanders. So those were crucial. And the thing that everyone worries about, Lance, is that's kind of been, Joshua Dobbs hasn't played very many games in the NFL. He started 2 for the Titans at the end of last season, and 1, they had the lead. That was the last game of the year. Whoever wins it wins the AFC South. And the Titans were winning that game with about 3 minutes to go when he had a sack fumble, and it was recovered by Josh Allen, not the quarterback, by Jaguars linebacker Josh Allen in return for a touchdown, and the Jaguars win the game. And he had an interception earlier in the game and another fumble in that game. So it's kind of been part of his MO. And so all quarterbacks know you have to protect the football. Otherwise, it's going to lead to bad things. And it certainly did on Sunday in Washington.
More of a reason why you can understand, to your point, they're going to take that into consideration, especially if a quarterback has 5 or 6 practices entering the first game, as to why they don't want to necessarily press the envelope. Howard, before I let you go, I want to move over to the Giants roster and a connection they have to the Cardinals, because they acquired Isaiah Simmons right before the season started. And you know him very well, having covered the team. A lot was made of whether or not Arizona utilized him the right way and what the Giants could potentially tap into him that Arizona maybe fell short of. What do you make of Simmons' tenure with Arizona, and perhaps if there is still a ceiling for him to reach with the Giants based on how Wink Martindale utilizes him, which may be different than how Arizona tried to tap into him?
That will be the key, is figuring out how to use him. And everyone talks about his explosiveness, his athletic ability, and all those things, but he just never seemed to fit anywhere. But, we all thought maybe the safety deal would be good, and he actually ended up last year playing more snaps at defensive back than he did at linebacker. But to put him in the slot at times and covering receivers, especially quicker guys, he just can't keep up with those guys. Interesting that this year the Cardinals moved Zaven Collins, an inside linebacker, to the outside, and there's many who think that maybe as an edge rusher is the place to really unleash him and to use him. But I still think at linebacker is probably the best spot, unless you can figure out how, as a safety, it really fits with the rest of your defense. But the last preseason game, they had him as a third safety, and he was just lost out there. It just, the interesting thing against Washington, the Cardinals brought in Kayvon Wallace, the safety from the Eagles. They claimed him on waivers, and he played 70% of the snaps against Washington and had a bunch of tackles, almost had 2 interceptions, and just played one game better than pretty much any that Isaiah Simmons ever did. So the challenge will be to find that fit for him. But, it's tough to find that fit once the season starts.
Sure.
And you have guys, there's not as many practice snaps and all that. So I don't know where he's going to end up after this season. This is the last year of his contract. And I'm sure a lot of teams will be wondering what can we do with him? And I don't know where that's going to be, because he's kind of like one of these jack of all trades, but master of none. And that really affected him with Arizona. And we'll see if there's any difference with the Giants.
Yeah, considering how many different positions he played at Clemson, they moved him all around. But like you said, life in the NFL is very different, and that's why that's going to be something to monitor and watch for the Giants. He is Howard Balzer. He covers the Cardinals for PHNX. He's been covering the league for nearly 5 decades. You can also hear him on SiriusXM NFL Radio as co-host of Hall of Fame Radio. Well, Howard, this was a pleasure. Always good to catch up with you. Enjoy the rest of the season. Enjoy Sunday's game, and I look forward to talking to you down the road.
Look forward to it, Lance. Take care.
My pleasure.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Howard. Don't forget to run or walk with Giants legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K Racing Kids Run presented by Quest on Sunday, October 8th at 9 a.m. at MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt. After the race, stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. All right, now let's turn our attention to the head coach of the Giants. Bob Papa had his weekly chat with Brian Daboll.
As always, we're joined by the head coach of the New York Giants, Brian Daboll. And, Coach, obviously you take on an Arizona team that played very tough last week in Washington and losing to the Commanders. They got after the quarterback. What were some of the things as you studied them getting ready for today's game that sort of jumped out off the tape towards you?
Yeah, I'll start with their defense. As you said, to create negative plays, scored on defense, created some turnovers. They got 2 explosive receivers who can run really fast. They have a tough runner in Connor who's scored a lot of touchdowns here in the last 3 years. A productive player, tough. Obviously, Ertz is a go-to guy and got-to-have-it situations. Certainly played a good game and came up a little bit short, but there was a lot of impressive things on the tape.
Dobbs has been around. He's been with a bunch of teams. Last year he started 2 games for Tennessee. Gets traded from Cleveland. How hard is it to sort of get ready for a guy that, although he's been in the league a while, really hasn't played in a lot of NFL games?
Yeah, I mean, you can study the games that he played. And, again, this is a new staff with a new coordinator, so it's the early part of the season. There's not a lot to draw from. You use the stuff that you have, and then ultimately you got to be able to play well and adjust throughout the game.
Yeah, their head coach, Jonathan Gannon, the former defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, who obviously went against your offense twice a year. Do you have to go back and look at some of the things that Philadelphia did just in trying to piece it all together?
Sure, you absolutely do that. You have a lot to draw from in terms of the Philadelphia system. Again, but he's his head coach, his own head coach now. He's going to run things how he wants to run them. There's definitely similarities, but there's always new things that coach has put in. He's a tremendous coach, great defensive coordinator, and you can tell by the way his defense played that first game.
I know that fans and even media sometimes they look at these bigger picture items, whereas you as a head coach, especially under the great head coaches that you learned under, the objective is to go 1-0, meaning just win this game. Forget about the game in 4 days. Forget about what happened last week. How do you get that messaging through to the players?
Yeah, I think we go back to OTAs and training camp and some of the guys that were here last year with the messaging. The messaging is always going to be consistent, which is focus on the things that you can control, your preparation, your film study, how you practice. Do everything you can do during the week to put yourself in a good position on game day, and then ultimately you have to go out there and perform well on game day, and that's really what it is every week.
Did you get a sense that this week your guys have responded to that, being able to flush what happened, learn from what happened last week, but also be able to sort of get back to basics and get back to what we need to do in practice.
Yeah, well, we had a good week of practice, too, leading up to Dallas and training camp, and obviously it didn't go the way any of us hoped it would go. Again, there's a standard that we try to set, Bob, and that's each and every day, which then goes into each and every week, and then you have to play well on Sunday or Monday or Thursday, whenever that may be. But you don't, make radical changes based on a result. You make changes each week, whether you win or lose, to try to help your team be ready for the week. And that's what we try to do this week. That's what we'll try to do next week and going forward. It's easy to get caught up in results. Obviously, this is a results business, and obviously we didn't get the job done. But sticking true to, the improvement process, the preparation process, how you practice, and then again playing a complementary football game, which we didn't do the first week.
Final question, Coach. Throughout training camp and in the preseason games, you and your staff were very good at sort of cross-training people. You got a lot of people, a lot of different reps, and a lot of different positions. Obviously, a little banged up on the offensive line. Is that where it pays dividends a little bit when you get into the season and things happen, that guys are, at least if you have to mix and match things in certain areas, whether it's on the O-line or any other part of your team for that matter, that guys have done that kind of cross-training and you as a staff have identified who does what well where?
Sure, that's part of the process of OTAs and training camp, is to do things like that. You're not playing a game. You're trying to prepare your team and prepare players for multiple roles. You can only bring so many people to a game. So, we'll always do that. Obviously, you'd like to have everybody healthy, but that's not the reality of the NFL. So the more you can do, and the position flexibility helps your team as you go forward through the season.
Coach, we appreciate a couple minutes. Best of luck.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Coach Daboll. Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 Best Bank in the U.S. by The Banker. As the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle, Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to our guest, Bobby Okereke. Thank you to Lance. Thank you to Bob. Thank you to Howard Balzer. Thank you to head coach Brian Daboll. Make sure you stay tuned to our coverage all weekend long of Giants and Cardinals. We're on the radio pregame on our local station, our flagship, WFN in New York. That starts at 2:05. If you're on our radio network, the network portion starts at 3:05. And then Jonathan Casillas and I will rejoin at halftime, and we will rejoin postgame for 2 hours of postgame coverage after the Giants take on the Cardinals at 4:05 on Sunday afternoon. For our team, I am John Schmeelk. Thanks for joining us on the Giants Huddle podcast. We will see you next time.